Welcome back. So we're on our next layer of this one, and nothing has really taken, a shape to me yet. So I'm still just kind of playing with it and seeing where it's going to go. I'm going to use my, where is it? Here it is. My long bristle brush, this very long one. And then I'm going to use a high flow acrylic. So it's just more runny, and that works really well for doing thin line work. So I'm just kind of going to play with a mandala around this main circle here, and then we'll see where I want to go from there, as we go. I do get a lot of fur on my paintings because I have one little dog who is like Pigpen from Peanuts. Painting a mandala can seem kind of intimidating, but if you just think of it as concentric circles with different patterns or symbols, so I'm just kind of doing this sort of petal shape, and I know roughly how wide it will be, and so I just keep going and adding the little brush strokes to make these petals all the way around. Keep in mind they will vary in size and width because they're all hand drawn, and that's part of the beauty. I think that all of the details they're all very human. And you can see how this brush just gives you such clean, lasting lines with this combination of the liquidy paint and the long brush. So it's just very fun. Okay, then next I'm just going to go around again, and I'm just going to put this drop shape in the little connecting point here between each petal, or petal shape. And you'll notice that I'm steadying my hand with my pinky. I do that to prevent smearing the wet paint by pressing my hand fully down on the canvas. And if you want to try something like this and these kind of shapes feel too these kind of shapes feel a little too intimidating to you, you can always start with, I'll show you in a second here when I go around, but you can start with a lot simpler shapes, like even just little lines or X's, or you could just do little half circles like this. So you don't have to start with particularly complex shapes. You just start with little familiar shapes. So you just take those little steps, and then it just automatically gets more and more intricate the more you go around, even though it's something simple every time. Kind of shows you're capable of more than you realize if you just take it one little step at a time. You can also do just connecty lines like this. And that makes things look more intricate, even though it's something very simple. So it's just really, you know, simple shapes. You could do some fun triangles or zigzags. And the thing is, you'll get weird spots like this, where like this one was smaller than all these other, you know, zoop zoops. And this one is longer than some of these other ones. And that's totally fine because it's still gonna be really pretty. And that's how, that's how things go when you're human making art. So don't beat yourself up about it. Just realize that's part of the beauty and the fun of the process. And so, you know, art just is, and it's wonderful, and the whole point is just to enjoy it and express yourself and take time to play. So there's no reason to set certain expectations because they don't mean anything. And as you can see, I'm just going to keep going around and adding these little whoop curlies. I don't know names for some of my shapes, so I found I use sound effects, which is very professional. But yeah, we're just taking each little point and then going out with a little spiral, point, and out with a little spiral, or more of a curl, I guess. Just little curl, little curl. These kind of remind me of fish, so I'm going to fill in around them now to kind of accentuate the idea of that. This is just kind of how I play with what I'm starting to see. But just because you see something doesn't mean you have to do something with it either. You can always just keep going and let it keep evolving. So I'm using just different teal and blue colors intermittently. And by doing that and then picking sorry, sometimes it's hard to talk and concentrate at the same time. I'll get better at it. But when I do that and I kind of keep going the same direction with it, you'll notice it automatically starts to blend. I blend paint on my canvas a lot, which I probably should have mentioned before now. But by just kind of throwing in those different colors at different points, it gives you nice gradients and fades to give you kind of a sense of dimension, even though you don't have anything particular kind of defining what it is. So the blue and teals here are that's not true. And one trick I use if I want to remove some paint from somewhere and it's still wet, if you take some matte medium and go over it, it almost like replaces the paint with itself. So then you just have the clear there and you can kind of then go over it. I found that's the most effective way, even more effective than just kind of wetting it down and paper toweling it up. But if you don't have matte medium, then just wetting it a little bit and kind of paper toweling it up is definitely going to be your best option. And so all I'm doing is I picked a color that looked watery, so it's these blues, and then I'm filling out around what are going to be fish forms. And so I'm just kind of making part of a circle and part of a circle. So just curved line, and then have them kind of connect in the front. And then towards the back, just have it open to a little triangle. And that kind of makes a bit of a fish form. You can see I left some of the yellow, that sort of yellow cream color, goldish, or that's the layer under this blue, because I liked that hint of yellowy gold with the purples and reds. And I like going over things with several layers because you'll notice usually, like here, it's still kind of translucent and you can still see some of that orange beneath it, which is also like something I really enjoy. So sometimes I use that to my favor and I leave that. But because of that, if you do want something to seem more opaque, like this kind of stuff, then you'll have to go over it more than once usually. And because of that, if you mix up the colors a bit and add some matte medium, you still get play even then with that layer you just laid down. So so in the same way that this first layer is kind of translucent to the layer beneath it, this next layer will be slightly translucent to the layer beneath it, but the layer beneath it is this blue one now. So it just kind of enriches the color and the depth of the painting itself. It's hard to see over video, but it's definitely something that's unique and a very, I think, fun trait in layered intuitive painting, that once you get used to it, you can start to play with it with more intentionality. So I'm avoiding these black lines at the moment because they're still wet and I just don't want them to bleed into the blue, although that would make a cool look. So if that sounds appealing to you, you can just keep painting right over it. It'll kind of smear that blue into it, or smear the black into the blue, kind of make gray, messy lines. And the more that you paint, the more you will get used to controlling your brush, getting used to the amount of pigment on your brush and how that will kind of spread on the canvas. You'll also start to notice the texture of the paint as it's drying. So you'll kind of recognize when it gets sort of sticky in texture and know the way that it will work with new paint as new paint comes on when it's that texture, or get used to about how long some things may take to dry based on how wet your paint is or how watery it is. So you'll just kind of get used to that sort of timing stuff as well the more that you play. So by adding in like a bunch of water here, it makes the paint and this area stay wet longer. And that allows me to, where this is kind of, I was using thicker paint and the canvas was drier, so parts that were left unpainted would dry much quicker. By having by putting down a bunch of water, it stays wet longer, which stands to reason. But it's just another different way to play with the paint and the canvas. And like this one, you can see the orange through it a lot more than you could on this style. And that's part of it, because it has so much water, it spreads the pigment out further, so it all goes a lot farther, but it's much thinner. So the color just isn't going to be as intense. And then I'm just making this kind of wavy to kind of give the idea of water, since I've decided these are now fish. So I'm just mixing in just a little bit of white, and I'm using an angled brush. And so and let's see. I'm just kind of finishing out this piece now. I don't really know what these shapes are exactly, other than I liked that these kind of circles were coming around and I liked the fish, and so it felt like doing something to kind of continue those shapes in some other kind of way. I just felt right. So, you know, these aren't necessarily anything in particular other than just shapes that I thought would look nice. to go with the kind of flow that, you know, has developed naturally with the piece. So this part here I can tell is still wet. I don't know if this shows up very well on camera, but if you tilt it a little bit, you can tell the shininess changes from wet to dry. So understandably too, like the big chunks of paint, the big dollops of them, or glops, the big jalops, are still wet. So I wouldn't want to paint over those because that would shimmer out. These are all made up art terms. So, you know, don't necessarily quote those to somebody else and think that they'll make sense to anyone other than in the context of that. So you can see some of these still were a little wet, and so they did pick up a bit of the black, but all I'm doing is just then moving it with the shapes that are there, so it just kind of fits in. I'm going over it just because I want to dull it down in some areas. I don't want the black to be so stark because it's the only black that is in this piece so far. And because of that, your eye is just automatically drawn to it. So just to tone it down, I'm using some different colors that have, that are translucent. So, you know, if you layer them and stuff, it still takes a lot to if they ever can fully mask the thing beneath it, because they're just not opaque. And then I'm just going to add a little more black in other places just to help move the eye throughout the painting so that there are other kind of equally noticeable parts. So I'm just adding, and not even to all of them, but just some of the fish forms. I'm gonna just add these little, you know, scales. Sorry, it just felt so Ariel the Little Mermaid, like, what are those? Oh, feet. What are they? Oh, scales. So anyway, yeah, so then that gives you the idea of, it just gives it more unity for all of it, kind of thinking of it now as a completed piece. So if you wanted, you could put little black dots and give them eyes. If you wanted to, you could fill out this more as sky, or you could, if you just did kind of some zigzaggy lines and had a contrasting color, so you could make that look like mountains or like a beach, kind of like shoreline that's behind it. You could continue out the mandala more if you wanted to, or continue it out in different colors. There's all sorts of ways you could play beyond this, but if you did just want to paint along to this point, we have a painting of some fish swimming in the moonlight, I guess, which I find kind of charming. So thanks for discovering this and painting along with me. I'm also including a quick, about a 1 minute time lapse or so of where I took the piece from here.